Hey guys, how you doing? Welcome to the show. And today is a very special guest. First time he's been on the show. Now, I remember him from back in the day of the Two Angry Guys. I used to listen to him every single morning, and sometimes I agreed with him, sometimes I didn't. But either way, they're very entertaining. He is Richard Skinner. What's going on, Richard?
I'm doing great, Iceman. How are you?
Good, man. Good. Now, you are a man of many jobs right now. You are the content creator for Local 12 for their blog.
Yep.
You also had the Skinny podcast. How long have you been doing the Skinny podcast now?
About 4 years. Rick Broering, who covers Xavier, has his own. He does Musketeer Report, musketeermadness.com. He and I have been friends for a long time. He's been working at Channel 12 as a digital news writer, if you will, and he wanted to start one about 4 or 5 years ago. Chad Brendel of Bearcat Journal, and I were doing a college basketball one, but he wanted to do a separate one, so we kind of spawned off into that. It was kind of unfortunate last year we didn't do the college basketball with Chad, only because we also were doing a post-game Bengals podcast each week, and it kind of almost took you almost to March Madness. So hopefully we'll get the basketball one back at some point, maybe next year. But that means hopefully that would mean that would not be good for the Bengals. So it worked out just fine. We had the Bengals podcast going as well.
Right, exactly. So let's talk a little bit about last year and what a magical season that was with Jackpot Joey Burrow coming back from the knee injury. Jamar Chase can't catch a football, can't catch a cold, nothing's going to go right. The offensive line's going to be terrible, yada, yada, yada. And lo and behold, the Bengals go to the Super Bowl and they, are seconds from or less than a minute from winning it. What was that like covering? Because I know you've been here for the 90s and all the way up to now. What was that like covering that last year?
It was surreal. I was a college student the first time they went to the Super Bowl. My dad was a season ticket holder. I didn't get a chance to go to that because the semester, my second semester, my freshman year had just started. But my father went. He and my uncle went to the Super Bowl in Miami, so I didn't get a chance to process that other than just being kind of a fan and watching it from afar. So yeah, to be a part of it, especially, it was just so unpredictable the way it took place. I mean, let's not forget. They don't beat Kansas City. They may not win the AFC North and not even go to the playoffs. And yet there they are in the playoffs. And then the whole buildup of haven't won one since 1990. And, can they finally break that? And it seemed like everything else after that was icing on the cake. And that sounds silly when you just mentioned you were that close to winning a Super Bowl, but it kind of was icing on the cake. Because I think just winning that game against the Raiders was, okay, that stigma's past everything. That stigma's past this organization. And then the Tennessee win, and then the improbable comeback at Kansas City, and then you're right, to almost win the Super Bowl. And the great part is this wasn't like the end of a window for guys. Like it's, the quarterback's 11th year and your star wide receiver's 9th year, and you got a bunch of guys who are going to be free agents. You have the window just opening. I mean, I think just making the playoffs last year was a nice opening to the window. Now it's, okay, you had one real weakness on this team, the offensive line. You spent an offseason trying to fix that, and hopefully they have. Right. And you go into this year with a better roster in theory than you did last year when you went to the Super Bowl.
Right. I mean, it can't get any better than that, right? I mean, that's where I think Bengals fans are so excited about this year. And I always keep trying to tell everybody to try to enjoy this because I know myself, when we went to the 5-year playoff run and all Marvin Lewis years, we never won a playoff game. And all I cared about, it seemed like, was winning that first freaking playoff game.
Yep.
Like you said, we got that over with. Now, like you said, the door is wide open. The Super Bowl window is wide open right now. And it opened a year early. I mean, a lot of quote unquote experts said, the Bengals might be a year away from it. Well, they kicked the door down last year. And with the additions of La'el Collins, Alex Kappa, Ted Karras, and just the experience of last year, this team could, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's almost Super Bowl or bust this year, I think, for those guys.
Yeah, the one thing that's interesting is that the national narrative now was that a fluke? Was that luck? Was that, it happens in sports where just occasionally you have a team kind of come out of nowhere. And that does happen. That is real. That is a real thing. But I think it's given these guys enough of a chip on their shoulder to say, hey, we're going to prove that this wasn't luck, that we are a good football team. Mike Hilton's talked openly about that, and Mike was part of playoff teams in Pittsburgh, so he knows about being part of playoff teams. And you have a quarterback who's got that swagger, has always had it, and it didn't take him going to the Super Bowl for him to continue to have it. But he's the kind of guy that, like a lot of guys in sports, everybody needs some level of motivation, and for them, I think this year is, okay, you think last year was a fluke, that's fine. And maybe to some degree, I mean, there was a lot of luck involved. Let's not forget how many close wins there were, but you put yourself in position to let that luck manifest itself into wins. I think that's where this group of players and this team, if they needed some incentive, because there's the talk of, are they going to regress? Well, they certainly could. A lot of things can happen. But I think if they needed a chip on their shoulder, they got a big one from what the national narrative is this team was lucky rather than good last year.
Absolutely. And you're right to a certain degree, but I always preface it this way with the playoffs. It ain't luck if you go to Tennessee, the number one seed, and you beat them in Tennessee, and you go to Kansas City, who, was the greatest show on turf or whatever, and you beat them. That's not luck. But now getting to that point, yes, I agree. There were some luck. But once we got in the playoffs, once they got that over that hump of the first playoff win, like I said, it was icing on the cake. And it just looked like for all of us fans, the pressure was lifted, and the players never felt that pressure of winning the first playoff game.
And I think that's important too. And that's part of what the new group is. Trust me, the Marvin Lewis group, the pressure was real for those guys. I can remember a year that they actually were really good. I think it was 13 or 14. I guess it was 14. They went up to New England on a Sunday night and just got destroyed. They were 3-0 going into that game. Yep. All the conversation was, is this team ready finally to win in prime time? Is Andy Dalton ready to win in prime time? And I remember I went up to Reggie Nelson after that game and I said, Reggie, does this sting worse because it's another one in prime time? And Adam Jones was behind him with his back to me, and he turned around. I won't give you the expletive he said. He said, well, yeah, dude, it's no worse. And I said, and you could tell that pressure was always building, and it built year to year. Maybe year one, they didn't feel it. Year two, yes. Year three, definitively. Year four, you got to win now or bust. And unfortunately, I think year four was the game in Indy where they were decimated by injuries and not good enough. And then by year five, it looked like it was going to happen. It was done happening, and then it didn't happen. And then I think at that point, that's when you could see they'd reached the peak and it was time to start over again. You're right. None of these guys were a part of that for the most part. The only two really were Kevin Huber and Clark Harris, and they've done their job pretty well for 13 years. So, I'm not worried about those guys feeling the pressure. So, no, I think it being a bunch of fresh faces, fresh guys, fresh coaches, kind of allowed them to play more loose and not have to worry about that pressure of going 0-7 like Marvin's teams did.
Right. Now, I know a lot of the national media and stuff kind of make fun of Bengals fans because we get so excited. We're getting excited. We're getting an indoor practice facility. And now I think some of us are excited about the new stadium name, which came out today. It's going to be Paycore Stadium, which I was kind of surprised that it's Paycore Stadium and that Paycore Stadium at Paul Brown Field.
I was hoping it would be reversed. I asked Mike Brown that at Media Day a couple of weeks ago would you like your father's name to stay on the stadium? And he was kind of wishy-washy, I guess is the term. He didn't really answer the question. He said, we'll cross that bridge when it comes to it. I'm kind of with you. I always thought it was going to be whatever, and in this case, Paycore Field at Paul Brown Stadium. Right. I still think that there should be a way, maybe you put his name on the field when all is said and done, and maybe we'll see that at some point before the regular season starts. I doubt we see it by Friday, but we might, and maybe that's what they do. But it is a little disappointing. Listen, the naming rights thing had to happen. Yes. Folks, if you want Joe Burrow in town, and he's going to need guaranteed money, they are taking the naming rights money, at least a chunk of it, and they're going to put it in escrow, which you have to do to guarantee contracts. This was a much-needed move. Mike Brown finally understood that, and the way contracts are going. Guaranteed contracts weren't a thing years ago. They're starting to become a huge thing across this league, and part of it is if you're signing a guy to guaranteed money, you literally have to have that money in an account. So this was smart of them to get ahead of it with this. I still would like to honor Paul Brown. I would hope they do that in some way, shape, or form. Like I said, Paycore Field at Paul Brown Stadium or Paycore Stadium, Paul Brown Field at Paycore Stadium, however you want to do it. I think he needs to be a part of that.
And another thing that's kind of starting up on Twitter, and I've kind of said this for the last couple of years, we got so many different statues at GABP for all the different players. If we have one statue, to me, it should be Paul Brown. No and that's with the the money they're getting now. Hope they can use that toward that. And I think the perfect place is right where the players come out there. There's the interest. They have the big banner there, "Welcome to the Jungle" or "Seize the Day" or whatever it says. And I can't remember. I think right there where everybody drives by, that's a perfect place to put a statue of Paul Brown. That to me is if it's not going to be Paul Brown Field or anything, at least get the man a statue because it wasn't for him. There's no Bengals.
That's pretty silly. Yeah. I mean, and not only was he the founder and all of those things, but the guy was still a hell of a coach. I mean, obviously he's more noted for what he did in Cleveland, but the fact he took a Bengals team to the playoffs in his third year, the 73 team was a great team, just ran into the Miami Dolphin buzzsaw his last year. That team went out to Oakland in 75. I mean, he made 3 playoffs in the span of from 68 to 75. That tells me the guy was always a great coach in Cleveland. He was a great coach here as well. And I'm with you. There's no more iconic person to this organization than Paul Brown. And there's got to be a way to honor him in some way, shape, or form. And a statue would be apropos.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm glad you brought up the 70s. And that's one thing I love about the Ring of Honor. And I love this about Bengals fans this year. I'm so happy that Isaac Curtis is getting in first. I know nothing against Chad Johnson or anything.
I got my guy though. I got my guy, and I'm gonna stump for him since you brought it up.
Who's that?
The second best player in Bengals history, and I love Isaac Curtis, and I love Ken Anderson, and I love Ken Riley.
Okay,
Lamar Parrish is the second best.
Yep, that's that's my guy next year. That's the one I'm going to sub for next year because I think they should have a guy from the 70s, early 80s, and then a modern guy.
I think you're going to see that fall into place. Yeah. Ice, I really do. I think you saw that this year. Willie Anderson obviously has been on that Hall of Fame cusp. I think this is a good way to push him maybe over that to that. Mm-hmm. Ken Anderson, Isaac Curtis. If you look at the raw numbers, they don't jump off the page at you. Played in a completely different era. They literally rewrote the NFL record book because of the way defensive backs mugged him off the line of scrimmage. But Lamar Parrish was literally by Pro Football Reference one of the 2 all-decade cornerbacks from the 1970s. Yep. He made 6 Pro Bowls in 8 years. He scored 12 non-offensive touchdowns. He had at least a blocked field goal return, a kickoff return, multiple punt returns, multiple interception returns, fumble returns. No, he didn't have the interceptions Ken Riley did, and I'm not here to besmirch Ken Riley in any way, shape, or form. Right. There's one reason Lamar Parrish didn't have Ken Riley's interception totals. They didn't throw at Lamar Parrish.
Right, exactly. Right. They threw at Ken Riley. Yeah, exactly.
And he did pick him off, so that was a good thing.
Yeah, and well, that's the thing, too, is that's what I keep saying about the teams in the 70s. We had some really good freaking players. The problem was this freaking Squealers had all-decade team, and there wasn't as many playoff teams as there is now. So, I mean, if they had as many playoff teams as they do now, it'd be a lot different. I think we would have more playoff runs, and who knows what would have happened. But that's one of the things that always drives me nuts, that people always think because of the 90s that the Bengals have always stunk. Like, no, in the 70s and early and throughout the 80s, they were a good team. Yep. They had bad years here and there like everybody else does, but for the most part, they were a good team.
Yeah, no question. And Paul Brown's the one that laid the foundation for that. And, I wrote a lot of columns, after Paul died that kind of laid on demarcation for success until the Marvin run. And certainly until last year was Mike Brown, unfortunately. And there was a lot of things that Mike Brown didn't do that he probably should have done to make this team more competitive through the 90s into the 2000s. And I think Marvin did some good things to get that ball back rolling. That kind of ran its course. And I think now you've seen Mike, to his credit, take his hands away from a lot of things and allow Duke Tobin to make some football decisions, allow his daughter, Katie, and her husband, Troy Blackburn, and now their child, Elizabeth, to be a part of some decision-making processes from the Ring of Honor, to naming rights for the stadium, probably talked him into it, to enhance things during the game and in pregame and all of those things. And I'll applaud Mike for that. It took him a long time, in my opinion, to kind of loosen the reins and let people do their job, but he finally did, and now you're reaping the benefit if you're a Bengals fan.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, from how this organization has changed from the day they drafted Jackpot Joey Burrow to what it is now is night and day. Just night and day. And I call it the Jackpot Effect. It's unbelievable of what they do now. I mean, Richard, we're signing free agents. I mean, we were one of the first teams out there to sign a free agent this year, and it was an offensive lineman, which we've wanted. I mean, just the stuff that they're doing, I never thought it would happen, to be honest, as things went throughout the 90s and through the Marvin Lewis years. It's amazing.
Well, and I think fans deserve some credit for that, because they spoke volumes by not going. And I know that's probably going to make some people mad that did go, probably like yourself, that, hey, I was a staunch fan and I kept going, and why don't you? Well, some of those fans, I think, really did speak volumes to Mike Brown of, listen, if you're not going to change your ways, it's not worth my money. And so you're right. Getting Joe Burrow was certainly the first building block piece to that. But then that offseason of signing DJ Reader and signing Trey Waynes, while the Trey Waynes signing didn't work out, it was still the right thing to do at the time. Mackenzie Alexander, they had to start rebuilding that defensive side of the roster. That continued into last offseason with, signing Awuzie and signing Mike Hilton, signing Larry Ogunjobi. I mean, you could see they had to rebuild that side of it. And I know it kind of came at the detriment of not fixing the offensive line last year, and it's kind of the Rome wasn't built in a day. So what did they do this year with their money? They went and signed those guys. That allowed them then in the draft to start to draft nice depth pieces that you can plug in the future. It wasn't, hey, we got to have a center in Billy Price. Well, they forced the Billy Price draft pick, and because they needed a center and it didn't work out. That's what happens when you force draft picks. They forced, in a way, the John Ross. We got to have a guy who can take the top off the defense, despite him having some injury issues and maybe not being really all that proven. They kind of forced their hand when they got back to this position of having a roster that really doesn't have any glaring holes. You could argue maybe no holes of any note, barring injury, of course.
Right.
Then you can start to draft for future needs. You can draft Dax Hill for the future, knowing you're probably not going to have Jesse Bates after this year if you have him this year, which I do think they will have him this year. But you're allowed to do that. And so, to their credit, they did do things differently. That's why I go back to these last 2 or 3 years. I think Mike Brown has just said, okay, you guys do it. I'm going to let you try to fix this. I've always been a big believer that Mike wanted to do it his way, that he wanted to prove to himself or to his father, I know football. I can do this. We couldn't, and he needed help along the way. And finally, I think he's relented into some of this, and now you got the benefits of it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that Duke Tobin and Zach Taylor are one and the same, because I think Marvin and Duke, like the John Ross pick, we all know
water.
Yeah, Marvin didn't want him. We all know that already. Duke did. I don't think we have that with Zach and Duke. I think everybody that's in that organization, from the scouts all the way up to Mike Brown, are all on the same page more now than I think they ever have, that I can ever remember, that since Paul Brown has passed away.
Yeah, and honestly, there was a little bit of, I don't say it was debate, but the year that they took Burrow, Justin Herbert was obviously there too. They went to the Senior Bowl, and the staff loved Justin Herbert. They thought a lot of Justin Herbert, but I'm going to guess that internally they all kind of got together and said, "Listen, Joe's our guy. That we might love Joe. You might love him more than Joe in some ways. I might love Joe," but they came to a consensus. Remember last year, the debate of Penei Sewell versus Jamar Chase, and that could have been an internal argument for all we know. And it turned out they made the right selection in Jamar Chase. And I think you're right. I think a lot of that, when it goes in concert, you can see you have draft success versus draft failure.
Right, exactly. Now I want to roll back to one of the free agents that you talked about that they first signed was DJ Reader, and I'm gonna go stump for him because I think he is such an underrated player. If you go back and watch his highlights in that Tennessee playoff game, we don't win that game without him. He was unbelievably dominant. I think it's a shame that he has not made a Pro Bowl yet or anything. I'm hoping this year's the year to get him with Larry O out, and maybe he'll get some more sacks and some more publicity this year.
Yeah, I think the problem for him is you can't measure him in stats. He's not a dynamic pass rusher. He'll probably be off the field on most pass rushing downs. I think you'll see a line that has Osai and Hendricks on the outside, Hubbard and BJ Hill or Cam Sample on the inside. But he does play an important role. I mean, he's taken on two guys, and it allows that guy where Larry Ogunjobi played when he played the 3 technique to just literally get through the gap, get through it quickly. He was really good at it. BJ Hill's really good at it. I think it allowed them, because BJ showed what he could do last year, to let Larry walk, free up some money to do some other things with. And I think that's the unfortunate part sometimes for defensive line play. I think we got spoiled by Geno Atkins, because Geno Atkins could record sacks, and he was great at rushing the passer and great at everything he did. And truthfully was probably, honestly, another great year or two away from being a Hall of Famer, and still might be under consideration for all we know. But yeah, DJ Reader's one of those guys you're never going to see big sack stats. You're probably never going to see big tackle stats, but you can ask Trey Hendrickson to his left or BJ Hill to his right or the linebackers behind him. What does he mean to that defense? And he means an awful lot.
Exactly. Now, we had a jackpot Joe Burrow sighting yesterday of him actually throwing a football. Now, I was over on the sideline with you, and they had all the Army guys or whatever. And I'm like, what's going on over there? So I walked all the way over there. And by the time I got there, nothing was going on. And then Baby walks by me. He goes, "Hey, Ice." He goes, did you see Burrow was throwing? I go, "Joe was?" He goes, "Yeah." I'm like, "Oh, I missed it."
It was just a soft toss back to the equipment guy, but it was a pass. It was a pass. He did throw a pass. He did throw a pass. It wasn't a formal pass, but I think there was a podcast that his dad did with Dave Lapham over the weekend or on Friday, I guess it dropped, in which he kind of laid out a timeline of a few weeks. I think sounded very alarming that, hey, a few weeks from Friday puts you really close to maybe not being ready for the opener. And I think Joe yesterday wanted to show everybody that he's getting better quicker rather than later. Now, listen, do I expect him at practice on Wednesday? No. Do I expect him to be throwing by next week formally? Probably not. but I do think you'll get him throwing in some way, shape, or form, probably the week of the Rams game. I don't think he's going to play in that game. Didn't matter last year. He played 3 snaps and it did amount to a hill of beans and he was fine. I think as long as he does that and gets himself, one thing is you can see he's lost a little muscle definition. He looks thinner, which understandable. I think he needs to get some of that back and get some throwing in, but you give him 2.5 weeks to get ready for that opener. I think he'll be just fine, but it was good to see it. I'm sure for fans, it was great to see.
Oh, absolutely it was. Now I kind of expect him not to play in the Rams game, but more maybe in the scrimmage practice day. I wonder if he's going to get into that more. I know that's.
I would tell you this. I hope he doesn't if Aaron Donald comes to Cincinnati. I wouldn't want to mess with that.
Right. Yeah, that'll bring back too many bad memories.
Exactly.
All right, so Richard, so you also this is the Cincinnati sports podcast, so I don't just cover the Bengals. I cover the Bearcats and the Reds. Well, the Reds, there's not a lot to talk about them right now. But let's talk about Bearcat football right now and what Luke Fickell has coming into this year, because they lost a lot. Let's be honest, they lost a lot from a college football playoff team and back-to-back undefeated seasons. So there's a lot to replace, but there's a lot of talent there. What's your thoughts on UC and this year's season?
Yeah, I mean, if you were to tell me 10 years ago UC were to lose their quarterback to the NFL draft in a round where he's not going to probably start this year, Desmond Ridder, but certainly he's going to be in the mix in the future for the Falcons. Right. You lose a wide receiver in Alec Pierce in an early round draft pick. Sauce Gardner is the number 4 pick in the draft, and there are 3 or 4 other guys that were taken. I would have said, "Ooh, good luck rebuilding." This team is probably not going to be a college football playoff team like it was a year ago, but I still think it's more than legitimate enough to be ranked as they are in the coaches poll. I'm going to assume when the AP poll comes out, they'll be ranked there as well. Tough opener at Arkansas, but I don't see them losing more than a conference game, and I don't see them losing more than maybe the Arkansas game. And I guess you could argue Indiana it will be a tough game, but it's here, so I feel better about that. You have a proven quarterback in Ben Bryant. He didn't really prove it here the first time around, but he proved it at Eastern Michigan, and now he's back competing for the job. They've reloaded in recruiting, and some of those guys are probably not ready yet. But no, he's done such a good job of rebuilding that roster and replenishing that roster and continue to fill in recruiting class after recruiting class. They're not taking a huge step backwards. Can I tell you they're going to fight for a college play? Last year felt like it. I mean, we talked about that all year long. The Notre Dame game was kind of it. Once I thought they'd go to Indiana and win, and if they could go to Notre Dame and win, you open the door to go to the college football playoff. And then every week the pressure built of, oh my gosh, they didn't beat this team by enough points. And oh my gosh, they didn't beat Tulsa by enough or East Carolina by enough. But that whole season, it felt like after Notre Dame, it's a college football playoff team, and they proved it. Hey, listen, I've seen Oklahoma in those college football playoffs give up 60 some odd points and get embarrassed and look bad. You see, they didn't embarrass themselves. I'm kind of disappointed they lost the way they lost because I didn't think they went down swinging in that bowl game. I thought they handcuffed Des Ridder quite a bit, but no, Luke Fickell has done a great job. Now you're selling the Big 12 on top of that when you're going to talk to recruits, and so that's also going to help you too moving forward. Depending on how this college football thing shakes out, if we end up with 3 conferences and the Big 12 is one of them and we have 12 teams, you have a much better chance of getting in as a 1-loss or maybe a 2-loss Cincinnati from the Big 12 than you do having to sweat bullets for the last 8 games of last year. They A, have to run the table, and B, look good doing it.
Right, exactly. The whole thing is blowing up again because the Pac-12 looks like it's disintegrating and it might merge with the Big 12, which I haven't heard this in a while, but I heard a rumor about an 18-team league or something. Like, I don't know if all that's going to happen, but either way, it sounds like UC's finally in the right spots to be a part of whatever the next evolution of this college football is.
And I'll be honest with you guys, if they hadn't gotten absorbed by the Big 12, I think you'd have been looking at Luke Fickell looking to go somewhere else, and understandably so, because UC was going to be on Lost Island with some other schools. I'm trying to figure out what's going to end up happening to the ACC. The SEC probably absorbs a few of them, but they're not going to absorb them all. And there's going to be a land of misfit toy colleges out there that are going to go, wait, we were just in a really good league 2 or 3 years ago. What's going on? UC's not going to find itself in that spot, and that's a big thing.
Yeah, exactly. And that bodes well for me as a Bearcat and fan. So I'm always happy about that for once. we're definitely like we're gonna get left out. Now the other cool thing about going to the Big 12, just the way it is right now, is basketball wise. Oh, yeah. It is the best basketball conference in the country. It will be.
Yeah, I don't care about Kansas coming here for football, but I think we all care about Kansas coming here for basketball, right?
Exactly. Or going there.
Or going there.
It'd be awesome to go there.
I've covered games in a lot of arenas. I've not been to that one. My best friend, one of my best friends, went there on a day. He didn't go to a game, but he actually talked somebody into letting him into the college, to the field house there, and said it was just, he just stood in awe with his mouth open, just soaking the history. And so, yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it's going to make for great college basketball as well. And especially, like I said, not excited when Kansas comes for football, though I guess you can be excited for a 56-10 win, perhaps, but for basketball, for sure, to see an iconic program like that come here, I think would be great.
Yeah, and hopefully on a semi-regular basis, because the biggest conferences,
yes, you never know. Year, but you never know how it's going to shake out. You may not play them every year. You're right.
Right, exactly. So, Richard, let's get into your background here. Now, like I said, I know I remember you from the two Angry Guys, you and Tom Gamble, and actually I remember you from before that. I think you were on The Score 1260. Was that and then Bob and all that other stuff?
Yeah, we started on Bob, and then we kind of worked our way around. We were with Chancellor Media, and they merged, and then we went to iHeart, where with LW, and that Tom Gamble and I did a morning show for about 13 years, I guess it was. Did Sunday morning sports talk for about 8 or 9 years on top of it on WLW. And then, occasionally in life, it throws you a curveball, and it did. And I've always been one of those guys. I've kind of been a two-job guy. I've worked in newspapers in this town. I started at the Cincinnati Post in 1991 and worked for them in the Kentucky Post till about 2003. Got out of the newspaper business for a couple of years, got back in with the Inquirer, worked for them until about 2015, and then took the job. I'm out right now with Channel 12. I've done a bunch of stuff with Channel 12 since 2000, doing the Sports Authority on Sunday night, doing some anchoring here and there as well. So I've touched a lot of media tentacles in this marketplace, and I always feel really honored. I mean, I grew up in Northern Kentucky. I went to the University of Kentucky. I have family that were West Siders, so I touched the tentacle of West Siders. Yep. I have let me see. I have a cousin who's a Mercy grad. I have her husband was an Elder grad. Their daughter's a Seton grad, and their son is a St. X grad. Technically not West Side, I guess, if you will, but still it touches the tentacles of it.
Close enough.
Exactly. So, I've always felt honored to really have come back here. I got out of college in 85 and went and worked at a small paper in Maysville, Kentucky for a handful of years, and came back here in 91 and feel really blessed to have been working in media in this marketplace for 3+ decades now. And it's been a quick ride. I've covered a lot of great things from I love high school sports. I'm a big high school football fan. I broadcast a lot of high school sports as well, still do to this day. In fact, the day we're doing this podcast, I'm going to go up and do a scrimmage soccer game for Lebanon tonight. I love high school sports. I coach high school basketball over in Northern Kentucky. So it's always, like I said, it's an honor to come back to where you grew up and teams you either rooted for or were around or a part of. And I say that because I grew up as a Bengals fan. You get a little more jaded when you get older and you get in the media a little bit. But I've told people, I said, I don't do this anymore. But in 75, I can still remember I was just barely a teenager at that point. No, I wasn't. I was just short of teenage years. When they lost that 75 playoff game, they recovered a fumble late. They were down 31-28. Ken Anderson got sacked on a 4th down, and I can remember crying like a baby. I mean, my roots go back to that. My dad was a season ticket holder for as long as I can remember for the Bengals. This is where I give you the other part of growing up here, but not being a fan for. He grew up in Brooklyn, so he was a Dodger fan. So as a kid, I was a Dodgers fan along with him against the Big Red Machine. That was obviously the great rivalry of the 70s, right?
Yes.
Dodgers that. And then, of course, as a kid, you kind of grow out of that and you go, well, I want my own team. So for some reason, I started rooting for the San Diego Padres, became a Padre fan. And then, work starts to take involved and you really don't have time to be a fan any longer. But it was weird because we would go to a lot of, we didn't have season tickets, but we'd go to a lot of Reds games throughout the 70s. And we'd always go when the Dodgers came into town. It always felt alien and foreign to kind of sit there with your mouth shut while the Reds were kicking the Dodgers' ass and trying to root for the other team to win.
Right, exactly. Yeah. See, I always try to not remind my kids, but tell my kids, like, when I was younger, the Reds were legitimately, they would win all the time. Like, I was real young in the 70s, they won multiple World Series. In the 80s, we finished second, from what was that? From 85 all the way to
89. I think 89 right before 90, right before winning in 90. Yeah,
exactly. Finished second all those years. I said, if we had the playoffs like we did now, they would have won the playoffs every year. I said, so this whole stretch of the Reds, the last 20 years for me has been a struggle. And I guess for what you just said about how the fans not showing up to Paul Brown Stadium, which is now Paycore Stadium, which maybe we'll call it the core. I don't know. Maybe
I know. I gotta get used to. I guarantee I'm going to write more than once here in the next few weeks with a game coming up. The game at Paul Brown Stadium, and have to go. Wait a minute, that's not right.
Exactly. But since fans didn't show up, and that has a lot to do with, you think, how the Bengals have changed, fans aren't showing up at Reds games. I
Right.
mean, and I'm a little, I won't say excited, but I'm pleased with the trades that they made. At least we've got prospect. At least we just didn't give the guys away. Because I mean,
Yeah.
everybody, we got guys who are legit prospects, and hopefully in a couple years they'll be up here. Now, my fear is by the time those guys are up here, then they'll trade Jonathan India to get rid of Green, to get rid of all the all the pitchers and everything. They won't be able to keep them anymore. That's my fear.
Yeah, it's a fair fear to have because they've not followed through with whatever rebuilds they've done, and they've listen, they messed up in 15. They waited too late. They got very little value for all the guys they traded because of the All-Star game being in town. They wanted to hang on to some pieces that they shouldn't have hung on to. It felt like they were all in the year of COVID, and unfortunately, the COVID hit that year, and it cost them fans. It cost them revenue. They squeaked into the playoffs, and then it was ugly in the playoffs. And then last year,
22 scoreless innings.
Yeah, exactly. Then last year was it felt like they were still on the cusp of doing something, but they needed to make a move or two, never did. And then this year, when they started to make the early trades, it was okay. Terry, they should have just come out in March and said, "Listen, we're starting over. I know you don't have to trust." Here's the way I would have phrased it. I get you don't have to trust us. Mm-hmm. We're asking you to trust us on this one because we are going to try to do this the right way. We didn't do this the right way in 2015, and it was clear back in March to trade Sonny Gray for a rookie prospect who's just a Class A kid at this point in the game, to trade Winker and Suarez. I get those moves. And then, unfortunately, they heard the noise of, what are you guys doing? And then they sign Tommy Pham and Donovan Solano and trade for Mike Minor. It's like, wait a minute, if you're going to cut costs now, just cut them. Right. Let's just take that money. Tell us, hey, we could have signed 3 guys for $20 million, but we're saving that for when we're going to be good. We promise we'll spend it. Instead, you got that mishmash from Phil Castellini on opening day, which
where are you going to go? Where are you going to go?
The Bengals, 28,000 people came to Bengals practice. That's on the same day the Reds were playing. That's where they're going to go, Phil.
Right, exactly.
But you're right. I think this time around, based on prospect lists, they did do a good job this time around of going and getting guys.
Right.
And I think that at that point, then, when you do have controllable parts, you pay those controllable parts. When you have to pay Hunter Green or Nick Lodolo or Graham Ashcraft, or eventually Ellie De La Cruz, and then go out and spend on maybe that 1 or 2 guys, not 5, 6 guys, that 1 or 2 guys that put you over the top. But they were very clumsy in the way they handled this, and I get fans' frustration with it for sure.
Oh, I was completely pissed off. I'll just tell you, I was so mad because last year I felt like we were this close. If you could have went out and made a move earlier, to go get an arm or 2 in a bullpen, it would have helped. Because how many games last year did they come back?
Oh, yeah.
And the bullpen blew it over and all. It was so frustrating. And then, like you said, if they just said, all right, we're going to rebuild, but then to try to give us the BS of, oh, we're trying to win. Like, no, we're not stupid. We know you're not trying to win. We can tell you trade all your best players.
Yeah, Billy Beane has said it best, the Oakland A's GM. Either you have a team that's capable of winning and you're going to do the extra mile to do that, or just suck and restart the rebuild again. Right. I don't need 77 wins. I don't need 82 wins. Hey, build yourself for a playoff team or tear it down and start to build towards that playoff team. And they were caught in that terrible land of middle ground that again, you're right. Last year, hey, you're close. Go make the move to put you over the top. And if not, tear it down and let's go again.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to say that. I mean, the 2 organizations that I can't stand, but I would like both my teams to be like, is the Pittsburgh Squealers, which I call them, and the Tweety
They've been great.
St. Louis Cardinals. Those 2, that's the way I want my teams to be run, because the Cardinals, they don't go out and get, I mean, yes, they have all-stars, but they build around it with their talent from the minor leagues. And then when they're in it, if they need to go get somebody, they have enough in the minor leagues where they can trade somebody. It doesn't hurt them to go get, an extra pitcher for, down the stretch or whatever. That's what the Reds need to get to.
Yeah, keep in mind they were in conversations for Juan Soto. It didn't work out for them to get him, but they sounded like they were willing to try to get Juan Soto. I mean, so yeah, that's what you do when you're close is make a move to go for it. And listen, I'm looking forward to seeing some of these young guys. I can't wait for the day to see Ellie De La Cruz. Hopefully he continues on the meteoric path he's on, and maybe by the end of next summer we see him up here raking and ready to start things going for 2024 and going, all right, a lot of pieces in place, getting closer. But yeah, you can't try to sell fans on that middle ground. I think that's what they try to do of, hey, don't look over here at us rebuilding. We're going to get a couple of guys there. And then again, Phil's comments had no place.
What was he thinking, Richard?
I honestly don't know. I think this.
He doubled down on it.
Yeah, I do think this, and he doubled down on it. You're right. He did, I think, hear the backlash towards his father about, kind of doing things on the cheap and being discombobulated and all those things. And I think he got hurt by it. And I think he felt like he was coming to his dad's defense, but you can't do that by attacking the fans. That's never a winning hand.
Yeah, that completely backfired. I mean, he will literally never hear it. I mean, they have to win a World Series for him to be forgiven for that. I mean, that's literally how far it's got to go.
And at that point, fans can say, "Hey, you know where we're going to go? We're going to go back to your stadium to watch a winning product. That's where we're going to go, Phil. Right, exactly. That's where we are."
Now, one other thing, real quick, before I let you go. Now, people have said, "Well, how many shortstops do you need?" To me, you can never get enough shortstop because you play shortstop and you can hit. They'll find a place for you to play because you're athletic enough. You can play anywhere. So that's the one thing I think that fans get it twisted sometimes. Like, why do we need so many shortstops? You never have enough shortstops, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's interesting. Charlie Goldsmith of the Enquirer and I, and he covers both the Reds and Bengals, and we talk a lot of baseball kind of in downtime around camp. And he's got a piece at Cincinnati.com. He's kind of put together a 2025 lineup, I believe it is. And if you look at that lineup, it's funny. He's got Jonathan India now playing the outfield at that point. He's got Jose Pereiro playing the outfield at that point. He's got Ellie De La Cruz playing the outfield at that point, and Matt McClain playing second base. There's 4 shortstops. And you're right. You can move those guys anywhere. I mean, Robin Yount was a great shortstop. Yes. Now, Robin Yount would have made the Hall of Fame just as a shortstop and absolutely. Just as a center fielder. He was great at both, but he was athletic enough. Bill James years ago wrote what he would call the position pyramid, where if a guy could play shortstop, he could play obviously second base, but play center field and probably both corner outfield spots. I've now given you 5 positions for one guy. Chances are that guy can probably play third base. Chances are Ellie De La Cruz is 6'5". If worst came to worst, he could be a great first baseman for all I know. I mean, yeah, if you're a shortstop, listen, can you convert a catcher into a left fielder? Probably not. But can you convert a shortstop into just about anything other than a pitcher? And maybe in some cases he can be the emergency pitcher. Yeah, you can absolutely do that. I'm with you. I think a lot of people made a way too big deal of that. They're all not going to pan out. I hope they do. Right. They do. It's great. And then listen, if you've got a surplus of them and you've moved a couple of guys around, they become trade pieces. They become great trade pieces. So it's not
and hopefully that's happening when we're in a playoff run. So we have these guys. I mean, that's the whole point to this is to have extra pieces of, okay, you want this guy? Well, give us that guy for, to help us down the stretch to go win a world championship. That's what winning organizations do. I mean, that's what the Tampa Bay Rays do all the time. And they don't ever spend any money.
No, right. Correct. That's exactly right.
It's all from scouting and development. And that's where the Reds have failed for years, to be honest. I mean, it's been a long time since we've really had a pipeline. I mean, we have guys like we had Joey Votto, we had Jay Bruce. We had those guys all came up at the same time. Then we didn't really have anybody again, Well,
I did a piece 3 or 4 years ago. I got some blowback from a couple of Reds fans on it, but it was literally the fact of how they had not really drafted and developed their own starting pitchers. The good thing now is when we look at them, Graham Ashcraft, Nick Lodolo, Hunter Green. All right, now you're starting that pipeline of doing that. You don't have to go out and spend a bunch on Trevor Bauer. You don't have to go out and spend a bunch on Sonny Gray. You've got your own guys. You're going to have to eventually determine whether you want to pay them when they get to their free agency, but you've got a long way off until that. That's how you do it. Build through the pipeline, and then we talked about it. Then, I'll give another word. The Cubs did a great job of that. They had a bunch of young guys, the core of guys. I know the argument they waited on Chris Bryant, and it kind of screwed him, but listen, they waited to the right time to bring him up. And then when they had the pieces in place, it was, okay, we need an extra pitcher. Let's go make this trade. We need maybe one more bat. Let's go make that trade. And what they end up getting out of it? First World Series championship in whatever 7,000 years. Right. And so, yeah, that's you've got to build through your own pipeline if you're not a big market club, and then you add to it with at that point, if you've got all these guys under control, either they're barely arbitration eligible or they're not free agency eligible, all those things, your payroll is going to be about like this that allows you then to go and spend on the key veteran pieces. And so, yeah, I'm kind of I wasn't excited in 15 because it really didn't look like they did it the right way. And in retrospect, here we are 7 years later, they didn't. I think they did this the right way, but it requires everybody to go, all right, let's be patient again. And I know how hard that is.
Yes. Oh, it sucks. I mean, I keep telling everybody, I don't think we're going to be competitive till at least 2025 at least. I mean, I don't, unless everybody hits next year and you see, I hope next year we at least see some growth. I'm excited to see the guys. I want to see them come up here, and I'm willing to go through the growing pain because I can see what they're trying to do. I understand that now, which I was completely pissed off before. I understand what they're trying to do. There's just, like you said, just stick with it. So if they get these guys up here, let them play, let them develop, and let's see what we have at the end of 2025. And who knows, maybe we're close. Maybe we're not, but that's the role or the plan they're trying to go with right now.
Yeah, and I that's again, it's hard to tell fans to be patient yet again,
Right.
but just be honest with them. I think that's what
Yeah.
they didn't do very well. They were not very honest with the fan base, and they tried to point the finger at the fan base, and it's not the fan base's fault. It's your fault for not building right.
You should never point the finger at your customers that are paying for the stuff.
No,
you should never do that.
I'll give the Brown family this. While they stumbled through some rough times of trying to get this Bengals organization, the one thing they never did was point the finger at the fans of why aren't you coming? And they've been pretty gracious. Can't remember who asked the question, but we were talking to Duke Tobin at Media Day. And it was a good question, I thought, and I thought he answered it the right way. He said, do you and people in the building feel vindicated for what you guys accomplished last year? And he could have said, absolutely. You know what? No one believed in us. And no, he didn't take it that way. He said, no, it was a sense of accomplishment. And it was great to see the fans come back and back us. And I think that's the right tack to take. I mean, I'm sure he does feel vindicated. I get it. I mean, hell, guys like me are pissing all over them. And I think rightfully so when things weren't going well.
Yeah.
But listen, I get if you feel vindicated. And he took the high road with that. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. Now, one thing real quick here, but since you brought up Duke Tobin, and I think Duke Tobin is I don't think he cares about this of him actually ever being officially named GM. That's basically what he is.
That's basically what he is.
But he can get all the praise without actually getting all the boos and the sarcasm it gets because he's not the general manager. It's Mike Brown.
Well, and that's the thing. And so some of those drafts you mentioned, the John Ross draft, the Cedric Ogbuehi, Jake Fisher draft. When I understood why they did it, I mean, they were looking for replacements down the road for at the time
Marvin Jones and Mohamed Sanu
for Witt and Andre Smith. When they took those two guys, I got why they did that. It didn't pan itself out. But the problem was when those drafts didn't pan out and Billy Price didn't pan out and John Ross didn't pan out, was I supposed to point the finger at Mike Brown or Duke or Marvin?
Right.
And that's the thing. No, at that point, there was nobody to go, who's definitively to blame for this? Right. And at the point now, it's kind of, who should we point the finger to credit? Is it Zach's staff doing some talent evaluation, or is it Duke staff in conjunction with Zach? And is it more Duke than Zach? That's the part now you'd like to be able to point the finger of credit somewhere, but you're right. You can't point the finger of credit. You can't point the finger of blame. And maybe it's a good way for them to be.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like you get all the praise, but you don't get all the pressure because I'm not the GM. I don't know.
Exactly.
So I don't think Duke will ever. I don't know if we'll ever actually have an official GM other than Mike Brown.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think you're right.
Exactly. Anyway, Richard, you give me like 42 minutes. I appreciate it.
Oh, that's great.
What do you got coming up here, on your podcast or coming out on Local 12 here?
Yep. I got a feature today on BJ Hill up. Of course, the story on Joe Burrow coming back and talking to Zach Taylor about him. I got a story on Chris Evans coming up here in the next day or so. We'll have 5 things to watch. And it's funny, I'm putting together 5 things to watch because it's always an easy thing for us to do for a preseason game. And I made a list of about 12 things to watch. So I got to whittle that list somehow down to 5 things to watch. And it's to watch without really probably watching many starters, but that'll be up. The podcast will be up on Thursday. That story will be up probably on Thursday as well at local12.com.
Awesome. Well, Richard, I appreciate you doing this. We'll definitely have to do this again. And I'll see you down at practice probably today, tomorrow, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Tomorrow, hopefully, it's a lot cooler than it was yesterday.
Oh my God, it was so hot yesterday. That was ridiculous.
That's about as bad as I've been around.
Oh, it was horrible. Anyway, thanks, Richard. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks, Ice. Appreciate you having me.
That's it.